Greetings everyone, and welcome to the BlastCast. I am Jarvis, and with me as always is, well, I don't have a name for him this week, Lightning Dragon.
The bastion of common sense.
We'll go with that. Well, let's get into Star Citizen news. This week is pretty much everything related to the Mercury. So we decided that we're going to talk about it a little bit compared to the Connie, which is a similar price range, and also another ship that performs a similar function, the Herald, if we feel that this ship is worth it. So let's go ahead and look at the cargo of these ships. For starters, the Connie and the Mercury both hold 96. Now I do feel that the Mercury could hold more if they moved that turret at least the way you entered it, or if they made it remote. To me it seems it's a big waste of space.
Now also keep in mind that the stats, as always, are subject to change and blah blah blah, out of date and development game.
That's true. Don't message us in 2019 and say that we were wrong. The Connie has a standard speed of 190, an afterburner speed of 910. The Mercury has a standard speed, or SCM, of 215, and an afterburner of 1050. So it is just a little bit faster. But the Herald is still the king. Its normal speed is 235, and its afterburner speed is 1360.
Which is probably the fastest ship in the game.
Oh, yeah. So if you're in a situation where you need to get your data where it's going, you don't want anyone to catch you, it's the Herald. The Connie requires a crew of 3 minimal, Mercury requires 2, and the Herald, of course, requires just 1. Some people were concerned that this ship would actually replace the Herald, but as you can see, for those people who don't always have access to play with others, or just want to go ahead and play by themselves, or they don't want to have the extra expenses that come along with NPCs and ship maintenance, the Herald still is going to be a fantastic ship, and in some ways, superior still for the job.
Yeah, it's more of a focused ship.
Now, the Mercury does sport 3 medium-sized computers, where the Herald only has 1 small, but once again, it's a focused ship. The Mercury is going to be shipping data in bulk, along with physical cargo. I look at the Mercury as, I don't know if you've ever played other space games, for example, like Elite Dangerous. Let's just use that for example. You can split up part of your cargo to carry passengers and part of it to carry cargo. So you can do 2 things at the same time. You can take this group of cargo and this set of passengers over to the same station and kill 2 birds with 1 stone. Same thing kind of goes here. Now, as far as the fuel ranges, the standard fuel tanks, the Connie has 2 medium, the Mercury has 2 medium, and the Herald has 2 small. But once again, this is also relative to how much fuel is needed to push so much mass. The Herald is the smallest of all of them.
Yeah, it's really kind of hard to say because I don't think we've been shown, and with the changes coming, the way fuel is drained might change.
Now, as far as deep space travel, quantum drive, the Connie has 1 medium fuel tank, the Herald has a small, and the Mercury sports 2 medium. So this is where the ship gets a little bit of an advantage if you want to go into deep space or go into places where other people aren't, and that factors into the weapons. The Mercury is actually vastly underpowered compared to the Connie when it comes to weaponry, but if you're at places where no one else can get to, it doesn't really matter. The Connie sports 4 size 4 gimbaled, or can be fixed size 5, 4 facing weapons, and 2 turrets, each with 2 size 2 weapons. Don't forget, of course, the snub fighter that attaches to it, and you can also, it's got enough space in the entranceway to put a rover. So the Connie is a very down-to-business kind of ship.
Not to mention all the missiles it has.
Oh yeah, and it's got a ridiculous amount of missiles. It's got 24 size 2 missiles and 28 size 1 missiles. It's just a missile boat. Now, the Mercury has 2 size 2 gimbaled forward-facing weapons and 2 turrets as well. Those turrets have 2 size 2s on each turret. One thing I don't like about the turret placement they have on the top turret is it's kind of low behind the slope, so it can't be used very well forward. I wish they'd stop doing that because it completely hamstrings a use of a turret in just a very detrimental way.
I don't think any modern or otherwise plane that had turrets has ever had a turret that had a blind spot that wasn't like a wing or something.
The only way that top turret is going to be able to hit anything forward is if it's forward and above them. Now, of course, the Herald just has 1 size 2 and 2 size 1s. Pretty straightforward. It's not really a ship that's made to go out there and get into combat. If anything, those weapons are more like blasting asteroids and just getting obstacles out of the way. Now, getting into the layout of the ships, we all know the Connie, we all know the Herald. The Herald is pretty much just a room.
Yeah, the Connie is several rooms glued together.
But the layout of the Mercury is interesting. Not only are we dealing with the fact that it's got a central hallway that runs down, everything is kind of built off the sides of the hallways, which is, a way that we construct things when we play games like Space Engineers and whatnot. We create a central area and then build things off of that. So I respect that. That works pretty well. They also added a ventilation system that's accessible by the character, meaning you can Metal Gear your way through the vents.
Metal Gear!
And it is, of course, a smuggling ship with hidden compartments, which won't be hidden to players, but because you're going to know right where that is. But it will be, I guess, to some degree hidden from NPCs. They'll have to have skill checks and whatnot to see if they notice it or whatever. My personal opinion, still the best smuggling ship is the one they don't expect you to be smuggling in. And in my case, I think the Freelancer Dur is actually my favorite for that, because it carries just enough cargo, and with long-range sensors and long-range scanners as a deep space explorer, you can see them before they see you. Best way not to be scanned is just not be there. Now, in some regards, people have been referring to the ship on the forums as an FPS level in space, though I still don't think it's nearly as egregious as the Starfarer. You can get to where you're going, you just don't have to go through all the wackiness that you do with the Starfarer.
Oh, you gotta get lost in that ship all the time.
Yeah, it takes a while to get used to it. So do I think the ship is worth it? Let's just start with the aesthetics. I'm really a big fan of the Crusader Industries aesthetic. I think this is one of the prettier ships that's come out. I think it's pleasant to look at in every way. It has that nice Starlifter kind of design. It's like they just basically shrunk the whole thing down. I have already stated my opinion on the turret issue, but generally speaking, they said this is Star Citizen's Millennium Falcon. Well, Millennium Falcon Millennium Falcon is kind of the opposite. It's an ugly ship that's made to be massively overpowered and overperform. This is a ship that's aesthetically pleasing and in some regards underperforms in other areas. Once again, it's a beautiful ship and I like what it has going for it. It's one of those ships that you can take out with a few friends, kill multiple tasks at the same time, maybe even pick up some rogue transmissions, get some illegal data or whatever, and just have a good old time. So price-wise, pound for pound, since it's about the same cost as a Connie, I really think this is a good move. I'm glad they didn't really jack up the price. Some of the ships that have come out lately have been really over the top in pricing. Either looking at a CCU or a fresh purchase, this is actually a good ship, I think, for any player to have, because it's going to give you multiple roles at the same time, allowing you to try varying forms of playstyle, which is kind of interesting because what we've noticed in Star Citizen ships, and someone pointed this out in my Discord, is that a lot of the starter ships or the lower end ships are very focused. It's the ones as you move up which seem to have more flexibility, which seem to have multiple tasks to be able to be performed at the same time. And if you think about it, in a lot of ways that's kind of the reverse of what you see in most games.
I can see the point in doing this though.
Yeah.
Because what this does is, well, technically it's backwards for almost every other game. If you look at it where if someone new is coming into the game and they're like, I want to play, this kind of ship. Well, they can pretty easily get into a ship that is just like laser focused to do exactly what they want. So if they want to do that, like scanning, for example, right? The Herald or whatever, they can get into that ship relatively quickly. And then if they want something better, or as they get more friends or whatever, they can be like, okay, well, what can we upgrade this into that allows me to play with more people or do more things? And I don't fault them for this kind of thing.
Oh, absolutely not. I just found it was interesting. I mean, I think it's a bold move, and it does kind of make sense as you go along larger ships that have more space and more ability to carry different systems. Yeah, I have no problems with it. It's just I just found it to be a very interesting observation. So we wanted to talk a little bit about weapons and weapon sizes, because a lot of people were talking about the Mercury and said, we want bigger guns, we want bigger guns. We did a lot of covering on weapons in this channel, like the arms race to the bottom. Lightning has some thoughts on it a little bit, and kind of let him take it from here, and I'll jump in. But yeah, go ahead, Lightning.
I sure love repeating myself. Now, this is purely my personal take. I mean, for starters, I don't care what CIG does as long as they make things work. My look at this, it allows options, and it allows you to kind of diversify. How you diversify, it's up to CIG and stuff. My idea mostly is if you limit weapons that have for fighters, right? Let's say every ship dies. So if it's a small ship, it can have this size weapons, and we've covered this a lot. But if you have like a range between 1 and 2 or 1 and 3, if it's a larger ship like the Hornet, I like using the Hornet as an example. If the Hornet can have between size 1 and size 3 guns, the size 3 guns are the maximum size it can fit. I know that's not true, but in this hypothetical thing, that's what I'm going with. Size 3 guns, they'd shoot farther, but they'd have a lot less damage per second. They shoot a lot less often, but they can shoot a lot farther. And the size 2s, obviously, they have like a higher rate of fire to kind of compensate for that, but they're losing the range. What this can do is effectively split your weapons into offensive weapons and defensive weapons based on the ship class that they're in. An offensive weapon in a Hornet would be like a size 3 or a size 2. But if you scale it up to like a Connie or something, if the Connie can have up to size 5 on the turrets, which would just be ridiculous.
Well, not the turret, but the forward-based guns, but yeah.
Well, yeah, because the turrets are limited, but that would make it where it's a much, much longer range gun, but at a severe rate of fire penalty. Let's say you have the size 4s in the turrets, because I think it's like size 3s in turrets, or size 2s.
They're size 2s.
Well, they shouldn't be. They should be 3s. In this scenario, let's say that they have size 5 on there, but they have a huge drain on the power, but they're incredibly, incredibly long range. So if you spy like, oh, there's a fighter coming in over at 9 o'clock or something, you go, okay, well, number one gunner, take some warning shots at him with the big guns. So you fire at him with the size 5s to kind of maybe shake him off, like, oh, he can already shoot at me, and make him kind of change his mind. And your rate of fire is going to be a lot less, but if they do hit, they're going to do quite a lot of damage. And on your second turret, maybe you have either size 4s, or maybe you are going crazy and you have like 4 size 3s. Now, when you're doubling them up like that, they're going to have that same kind of power draw as the really big guns, but at a vastly reduced range. So you probably can only run like 1 turret at a time, but your amount of volume of fire, either with the quad 3s or the 2 4s, is going to be enough to either blind them or do enough damage to disable the ship or make him think twice about attacking.
It's too bad they got rid of the quad weapon thing that they were going to do.
Yeah, that's kind of what I was thinking. But I mean, you could still do it in the way where like they actually get a rate of fire boost because there's plenty of extra power for them to fire. Yeah, and this kind of goes in line with real weapons. If you go back to World War II and like the Navy ships and stuff, they had like 105s and 40 millimeters and 20 millimeters and all these kind of different guns, because what they did, and a good game that simulates this is World of Warships, which I know maybe not everybody likes, but what that does is you have effective coverage zones. Bigger guns like 105s, I think 120, 125, I think. Millimeters, obviously not inches, that'd be huge. There are certain guns that were dual purpose, like destroyers eventually had dual purposes. And your really big guns have a very long range they can fire at, but they're not going to fire very quick because they have to be reloaded, or in Star Citizen case, the energy has to build back up, or shells being reloaded for physical weapons. But as you go down in size to like the 40 millimeters or the 20 millimeters, your rate of fire increases, but your range drops off. So it becomes more and more dangerous the closer you get when you have those overlapping fields of fire, to the point where if you're really close range, like with size 3s or something, they're going to be just annihilating you, at least as far as hitting you. A plane in World War II didn't take much to shoot down, whereas, starships have shields and armor, but the volume of fire may make you change your mind, or because you've been flying at them this whole time to get in range of your own guns, which are a lot smaller, maybe your shields are down by this point and you're taking armor damage, or you're like, maybe I could engage him, but the chances of him destroying me are going up the longer I stay here. I think that would offer a lot of versatility to the game, and then you could take like, oh, well, we want to release the ship, but we only want to have size 4 guns on the turrets. Well, maybe it's designed for size 4. It's not reaching that upper limit. So your rate of fire isn't hampered by like the power core or something. So, well, yes, it doesn't have size 5s. Your size 4s are much more efficient, and they're more of a defensive type weapon. And I think that'd be a great thing to classify when they talk about the turrets and things. It's like, oh, well, it's more of a defensive turret. Well, why is it a defensive turret? You need to have some variance on how the guns work, so that you can have an offensive type weapon and a defensive type weapon. Obviously scaled based on your ship.
And that goes along the lines basically of just because you can equip something doesn't mean maybe you should. For example, the Hornet, you could put those 3 size 3s and the size 4 if you put the flash fire mount on there, okay? But maybe in order to power those weapons, you need to drop your shields down to something minuscule. Or maybe if you want to have really powerful shields, you need to drop down to size 1 weapons. The point is that the power systems in the game should be a tool to let you make selective and informed choices to keep things kind of balanced within the game. While they have different abilities to scale upwards, it doesn't necessarily mean that they always can. It's just having more options doesn't mean that all options are utilized. For example, maybe you want size 3 weapons if the power draw is too high, so you have to go with physical, because physical requires much less energy than an energy weapon, and now you're limited by ammo. So you have big guns, you have decent shields, and you have very limited ammo. So it's one of those things that when it comes to the power supply as well, and dealing with the weapons and the systems, just because you can doesn't necessarily mean you should. So I'd like to see this kind of complexity come in where you have to balance those choices. Of course, a lot of that comes to bringing weapon damage spreads between tiers within reasonable levels, and that of course involves getting rid of things like IM. So,
also, the flight, the turrets don't work in the current flight.
Exactly. So those are all things that Chris addressed to some degree, except IM. These things have to change, and some of these things are officially in the works, or at least intended. But yeah, the power system right now, I see a lot of people complaining that they don't have enough firepower or enough energy to fire X, Y, and Z. And I think this is something that needs to be an important consideration to, like, you need to have just enough power to operate things at your default level. And then when you modify it, you have raised things up, you raise things down, both components and weapons, to make it all work. General thoughts on that, because of all the comments about the weapons on the Mercury being too small. I guess it comes down to, it depends. Alright guys, and later this week we're probably going to go ahead and do a review of Monster Hunter. Maybe they're either in-game, or we thought about doing an in-game review because that should be chaotic as all hell.
Yeah, we love doing chaos.
We do it well.
Every Monday, every Tuesday, whatever day it is. I don't know what day it is.
It's that day again.
It's that day again.
Alright guys, that's about everything for this week's BlastCast. And we're still kind of in the content drought. I would expect Evocati to go into testing within, I don't know, 2 to 3 weeks. If they want to get it out in time for CitizenCon, cross your fingers. Catch you in the next one.
Bye-bye, everybody.
Hope springs eternal.
No hope allowed. I changed my mind.